What up? Sam Somatic back at it. Um, I wanted to actually have this conversation recorded. Actually, had a conversation with one of my partners, one of my buddies, and he's trying to change science. He's trying to change the standard. He's gonna basically try to convince me that there's one half of the world who agrees with like dating older women, and then there's the other half of the people who basically are the older men who date younger women. Basically, like it's split down the middle. Um, as if the word sugar mama is pushed or passed around and used loosely among any community. So and also basically, the fact that women are based on youth and beauty, and that's why we see them constantly wearing makeup, constantly working on ways to make themselves appear younger. As far as adding filters on their Instagram and their Facebook, even their pictures, a lot of Photoshop is done to make themselves appear younger. A lot of women, get plastic surgery done to remove wrinkles. They'll go as far as getting laser surgery, because women want to still look youthful and beautiful. Not only that, a woman isn't really going to be validated once she gets over a certain age, and that also has to do with her inability to reproduce. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was actually hit on when I was coming up by some of my friends' mothers. And they would say, "Oh, I'll take care of you. I'll make sure you straight." Even some of my friends' mothers' sisters. And they're like, "Oh, what I do with a young man like you." And I was like, first of all, you're my homeboy's aunt or my homeboy's mom, and then secondly, I'm not physically attracted to you like that. I've had this argument with a guy. It's a buddy of mine, and when I talk about these situations, I talk about it in a form of a relationship, and he tends to talk about it basically as a fuck thing. I try to get him to understand, because he said, "Well, hey, man, if I wanted to fuck your grandmother, like, it shouldn't be no problem. Like, like men will get mad because, a young man, their age is fucking around with their mama and shit. You're like your mama, she still, want to have fun and shit, all of this shit." I'm like, well, I mean, that's cool, but like again, you're not gonna tell me like it's the standard for men to just go out there and date, women that are 20, 30 years their senior. No matter how much money they have. Because I even explained that too. Because, you can go ahead and date an older woman, and she's gonna be on you. She's gonna tell you, you better let those little girls know, who's boss and all of that shit. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, this is what goes on. I mean, I've seen it in several areas. Like, when those older women get with these younger guys, like, that's how they are. Like, you better tell these young girls where they get off. Like, you better not have them little girls call up, the house and shit. When you hear like 2, 3, 4 in the morning and shit. You better tell those little girls who's boss. But they get older. They want to settle down and shit. They want to be more family orientated. He's making it seem like it's a fuck thing. Like, I'm like, look, man, just think the whole thing out. Because, it's the same thing with older men. Like, you're not going to be in your late 40s and 50s and shit, courting some young 20 fucking year old or early 30-year-old female, and think that she's not going out and she's partying and she wants to, still be young, she's still youthful. She doesn't want, to have this major responsibility. But I mean, sure, for her sugar daddy, she's going to make sure that the bathwater is ran. Like, let me go and leave you guys later. I'm gonna have to leave early because my sugar daddy, and I gotta make sure that food is on the table and the bath waters ran for him and shit. Because she still wants to go out and have fun. And then not only that, like, you still gotta be physically able. Like, you're not gonna be some Homer Simpson guy fucking around with these young girls. But at the same time, women are based on youth and beauty. So as far as the norm, I'm not saying that I, will go out and date some, fucking young, early 20, mid 20-year-old girl when I'm like in my mid 50s and 60s and shit. But I mean, it does happen. When it comes down to money, then yeah, you'll see, a few Hugh Hefners or a few Donald Trumps walking around, dating women, younger than them, of course, by at 17 years the least. I mean, my grandfather was one of them. One of his wives was 17. They were married for like 20 years, but she was 17 years younger than him. And like, I don't know what's wrong with my buddy, bro, because he keeps hinting, the fact that, he likes older women. Like, there's a song that came on with this young, I guess, 19, 20-year-old guy talking, about how, she don't want to talk to me because I'm young, but, basically, like, her boyfriend rides an Oldsmobile, and he rides a Ferrari, and, she, needs to take and give this young man a chance, and, while, the husband, I guess, is at work, with the Oldsmobile parked in the driveway at his job, he can come swoop up in the Lambo and, all of this shit. So, I mean, that was hint number one. And, I mean, like the second hint was just, the conversation that we had today. I mean, it's just been several hints in between that, But I'm like, look, bro, not necessarily my grandmother, he said, yeah, man, if I wanted to, fuck your grandmother, like, it shouldn't be a problem, you know what I'm saying? Like, just hypothetically speaking. But I'm like, at the same time, come on, man, for real, bro. Oprah Winfrey, even with her, it's like, as much money as she has, you don't hear that, like, young men in the black community, like, oh, man, I put that dick on Oprah. And, there's a reason behind it. I mean, any fucking woman with money. Hillary Clinton, we go on and on and on. And I'm pretty sure, like, people listen to this video in full, they'll probably go back and say, well, yeah, I'd fuck the shit out of Oprah. I'd fuck the shit out of Hillary Clinton. But I mean, the mass majority is not out there saying that. And that is why I had this argument with the buddy of mine. I'm like, man, we can go back as far as, like, the early 15th, 16th century even. I mean, when kings would choose their women. I mean, women date older men because a lot of times the men their age are immature. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've got that, but, for some reason when we had these conversations, he doesn't get the full picture. It's either like a fuck thing or it's like pedophile shit. So we had the conversation about Aaliyah. And I really don't want to make this video too long. But, we had the conversation about Aaliyah, and, he says that, what about Dame Dash, fucking with Aaliyah? You don't think that's pedophile? I'm like, well, Aaliyah was 22 years old, when she died, and Dame Dash was like, in his maybe late 20s, early 30s? I mean, I don't see any problem with that. And then on top of it, like, I mean, if you really want to talk about what was wrong, because he tried to associate it, like, with, the whole R. Kelly thing, I said, well, hey, R. Kelly was fucking with her when she was 15. I mean, that's a big difference. I mean, I've seen a lot of women who have lied about their age and have got a lot of men that I know caught up. Where these girls basically say that they're 18, 19, in their early 20s and shit, and these girls are like 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. I've seen it happen to a couple of buddies of mine coming up in New Orleans, and it's not a pretty sight. And it gets to the point where you have to, ask these girls for IDs and shit like that. But, the norm is for women to date older men because men get more distinguished as they get older. And it's really, it's part of it's a physical thing, but more of it is like, stability thing, a mental thing. A man with money and resources can provide for a woman, and, he can, think more ahead because he's the leader. I mean, think about it, even with the elderly people back in the, who were young back in the teens and 20s of the 1900s and shit. With those guys, they would have like 17, 18 children, some families, But look at the age gap between the husband and the wife in a lot of cases. And just look at the father. Like the father passes away, and then 20 years later, 15 to 20 years later, then the wife passes away. The wife is basically a widow for 15 years maybe before she dies, sometimes longer depending on the situation. And I mean, that's what it is. Like, but I keep getting these hints from my buddy. Like I say, he showed me a YouTube video of this young guy. He had to be maybe in his 20s, and the guy is like driving, and he has this elderly woman. And I'm serious. I mean, this was an elderly woman. When I say elderly, I mean a woman over the age of 75 years old. I'm talking elderly, like not saying shit, looking emaciated. And he's like, yeah, look, this is my bitch right here. She sucked my dick. This is my motherfucking bitch right here. Yeah, this old ass lady, man, she got some good pussy, and all that. And I'm like, God damn. But it's not the norm. And he thinks it's funny. He thinks it's cute, and I'm like, this isn't the norm, man. So it's crazy. I mean, that's another hint. I mean, just come out and say, hey, I love older women. I've had men tell me that shit. I went to this old Hotep ass Ashe gathering, and I'm standing at the edge of the river, just looking at the river. Everybody's throwing flowers in the river. Martin Luther King, Ashe. Malcolm X, Ashe. Frederick Douglass, Ashe. Rosa Parks, Ashe. They just throwing these white roses, and I'm standing out there looking at this shit, and one of the young dudes walked up by me, in his early to mid 20s, and it's like, man, they got some beautiful women out here, man. And I'm looking around like, where they at, Because everybody around me, like these old ass Ashe Hotep motherfuckers. You got the old women with the gray dreads and shit, And you got a few other women, but you could tell like they're in their early 50s, they're old, they got salt and pepper in their hair and shit, what I'm saying? But he's like, man, I'll fuck the shit out of these old ass women, man. Shit, I love old women, I love them. And I mean, I was thinking in my head like, okay, go ahead, do what you do, because like even some of the older women friends that I have had, I have a friend of mine who passed away. We were actually neighbors, and I would go by her house, like she would bring food over, and I'd try it out, and I'd bring food over to her and try it out, and she's like a little older than my mother, but we were tight, like I would go over to her house and have drinks and shit, watch TV and clown and chat with her, while she sits down and she smokes her cigarettes, I would sit there and drink a beer, and, we'd be pouring shots if I could just laughing and clowning, talking about different events that are going on in the news, and, she's telling me how her granddaughters are, and, we were just buddies like that. But, we hung so close where, like one of my homeboys, his girlfriend thought that I was fucking around with this old lady. Ugh, like he's fucking with her, and I'm like, hell no. You know what I'm saying? We just cool like that. Because like I say, like even with women, it looks bad. Like you got a woman, that she's your age, and she's watching you date a woman, that's like fucking 25 to 30 years older than they are. It just looks bad. But I mean, if she was dating an older, man, just say like she's in her mid 20s and shit, and she decides to date an older man in his, 60s, 70s, like, sure, it looks kind of weird. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, that's her sugar daddy. I mean, when you look at the elderly people, I know some women in their fucking 50s and 60s that mess around with men in their late 70s and 80s and shit, I mean, would they be considered, sugar daddies to these 50, 60-year-old men? I mean, in a lot of cases, women, they would be considered sugar daddies in a lot of cases. My grandmothers actually have done that. Like, she was fucking around with a guy like damn near 30 years older than her. Like, the man died at 95, and, this was like 15 years ago. And my grandmother was, in her 60s? So yeah, the man was like 30 years older than her. You know, but like, did I see it as abnormal? No. I mean, I've been knowing the guy for a long time. My grandmother even told me that, they fucked around and shit. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I knew y'all had been doing something and shit. All of this time y'all been hanging together and shit. But I don't know, man. It's not normal. I mean, do I accept it? It don't really bother me. Like, that's a fetish that a lot of men have out here, but it's not the vast majority. Just like the vast majority of women, aren't out there, being lesbians. Just like a lot of men aren't out there, advocating, gay or gay sex. Because like I say, it's a person's preference. It's a certain preference. It's not, the standard heterosexual preference. So, I don't know, man. I just look at it like if you're dating older women and shit, then, it's just, your preference. Just like, some people have the preference of having women play around with their booty hole. Like, I've heard a lot of men who like to get their salad tossed and shit. Me, personally, I wouldn't want a woman, anywhere near my asshole. It's just like no homo. Like, it's just don't seem appropriate. But a lot of guys think it's cool. It's like a lot of guys like to be tied up and shit when they're fucking around. A lot of guys like to be squirted on. I'm not saying that this is any preferences of mine, but these are odd preferences that are out there. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this video alone, man. Did I mention Hugh Hefner? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, Hugh Hefner, man. You know what I'm saying? His old man is with a bunch of young, beautiful women around him and shit all the time. He's walking around with a fucking robe on. I don't know. I just had a brain fart, and I said, Hugh Hefner just hit my mind. But, even Donald Trump, I mean, like those guys have, younger wives and younger women and, I mean, that's just the way it is, man. So, I'm out. Sam Sim. Peace.